Hi everybody, this is Miss Huball. This presentation will be on tone and mood and how they are impacted by imagery and diction. So some poetry terms we'll cover here are antithesis, hyperbole, apostrophe, allusion, parallelism, personification, and speaker. The poems we'll cover from your poem sheet are number 4, Love Song, number 3, Two Songs for Hedley Anderson, and number 1, When You Are Old. So we'll jump right in here, talking about tone and mood. All right, tone, as you know, is the author's attitude towards his or her subject matter. Often when we talk about tone, we talk about it as how the author feels, and we infer how he feels from the things that he says and the ways in which he says them. And we usually try to describe tone in descriptive terms, not something simple like happy or sad, but using specific and very detailed adjectives. And lots of things contribute to tone. Today we're going to talk about how diction or word choice can contribute to tone, and also how imagery can. Mood and tone are very closely associated because they both deal with emotions. Mood, however, is the atmosphere created by the author. So mood is kind of how the author makes us feel. And just like tone, there are many factors that contribute to the development of mood. So when we talk about tone and mood, we want to make sure that we're being more specific than angry, sad, happy, or surprised. We're wanting to use the outside words that you see on this tone wheel. So we start on the inside. Okay, I think overall this is a happy tone, or we're supposed to have a happy mood. Then we say, well, what kind of happy is it? And we can choose from these. And then we say, well, what kind of joyful is it? And we can choose for these. These are good adjectives that can help you to describe tone and mood with just the right word instead of being general and saying mad. So let's take a look at a couple of poems. This one's called Love Song by Dorothy Parker. It's in your poetry packet, so pause me now and take a minute to find it. I'm going to read it to you now. My own dear love, he is strong and bold, and he cares not what comes after. His words ring sweet as a chime of gold, and his eyes are lit with laughter. He's jubilant as a flag unfurled. Oh, a girl, she'd not forget him. My own dear love, he is all my world, and I wish I'd never met him. My love, he's mad, and my love, he's fleet, and a wild young wood thing bore him. The ways are fair to his roaming feet, and the skies are sunlit for him. As sharply sweet to my heart he seems as the fragrance of acacia. My own dear love, he is all my dreams, and I wish he were in Asia. My love runs by like a day in June, and he makes no friends of sorrows. He'll tread his galloping rigadoon in the pathways of the morrows. He'll live his days where the sunbeams start, nor could storm or wind uproot him. My own dear love, he is all my heart, and I wish somebody'd shoot him. So this one probably made you smile. And what probably made you smile was the contrast that you get between the first section of every stanza and that last line. So in each stanza, you've got that contrast between this very formal diction. It's got similes here. We've got simile, simile, simile. We've got alliteration. We've got almost like a hyperbole. He's so awesome in the first 7 lines of each stanza. He's so awesome that anyone would be crazy not to love him. And then the last line is kind of deadpan. She uses more informal diction there. She's very straightforward, not flowery, not poetic, not formal. And she kind of uses a parallel structure in each one. And I wish, and I wish, and I wish. All right? And so that creates a very overall smart alecky tone. She seems cynical. She seems to be being ironic about this love that she has, this man that she is so very in love with. And we can identify with that, because love truly can be all things beautiful and magical one moment, and the next moment a real pain. So the mood she creates right here is lighthearted and fun, even though her overall tone is pretty cynical and ironic. So here I've got the red is our similes, where she compares his words to a chime of gold, his happiness to an unfurled flag, and his impact on her heart is just like when she smells the beautiful fragrance of acacia. We've got allusion here to Greek mythology. A wild young wood thing bore him. That's not a technical straight allusion, but there's a lot of that in Greek mythology. And over here, the use of diction, she uses this old-timey language, galloping rigadoon, which is a word for horse, a certain horse that's rigged up a certain way. And then the pathways of the morrows, she says, instead of just saying in the future or something like that. So her elevated or formal diction adds to this classic poetry feel we get from the first part of these stanzas. And that gives us a beautiful contrast with this flat, deadpan, sort of straightforward, parallel structure that you have on these last lines. And parallel structure means you've got a line that's structured the same way grammatically. So you've got a conjunction, a subject, a predicate, and then the next part is a little independent clause. Okay? Well, actually a dependent clause. All right, next one is When You Were Old by Yeats. So I'm going to read this one to you, and as I'm reading, see if you can figure out who the speaker is. When you are old and gray and full of sleep, and nodding by the fire, take down this book and slowly read, and dream of the soft look your eyes had once, and of their shadows deep. How many loved your moments of glad grace, and loved your beauty with love false or true? But one man loved the pilgrim soul in you, and loved the sorrows of your changing face. And bending down beside the glowing bars, murmur a little sadly how love fled, and paced upon the mountains overhead, and hid his face amid a crowd of stars. So this one's a little harder to unravel, but some things jump out at us. We've got diction or word choice here. When he says one man loved the pilgrim soul in you, that probably jumped out at you. What would a pilgrim soul do? What does a pilgrim do? A pilgrim searches, oftentimes goes on quests or journeys or pilgrimages, right, of a spiritual nature. So to love the pilgrim soul in her and to love the sorrows of her changing face meant that this man loved the real her. Now, we've also got some personification over here. Love has fled and paced among the mountains overhead and hid his face amid a crowd of stars. So love didn't come to this woman who's old and gray and full of sleep. And he directs this poem, the speaker directs this poem to her. He says, when you are old and gray. We call that apostrophe. So who is this speaker? The poem is dominated by two images. In stanza 1, you've got the image of her, old, sitting by the fire, reading a book that has this poem in it. And the third stanza is dominated by this image of love that she missed out on. He fled and paced among the mountains. So the overall tone of this poem is bitter, and you may not have caught on to that first, but the speaker here is operating on many levels. All right. When he tells her, when you're old and gray and full of sleep and nodding by the fire, you're going to take down this book and you're going to read this poem. Okay? So think about that for a second. His second stanza says, you had lots of guys who loved you, but there was one guy who really loved you. Third stanza says, you didn't get true love because true love fled away from you. You must have picked someone else and banished true love to the mountains. So she's old and gray. She's sitting by the fire. She's reading this poem, and our speaker in this poem is kind of telling her, hey, lady, you missed the boat. You had a good, loving man in your grasp, and you let him go, and that man was me. So now that you're old and gray and sitting alone, and you've missed out on love your whole life, in your face. That's kind of what he's telling. And in this one, the tone is bitter, but it kind of contrasts with the mood. Because when you read this poem at first, it doesn't seem angry or bitter. It feels kind of cozy, a little sad, but not terribly so. And so When You Are Old is a poem that operates on a lot of different levels. And that tone comes from the interaction of the speaker with the things he chooses to use, his diction, his apostrophe, and his personification. All right, now the rhyme scheme and the meter in this poem, we didn't talk about that in the previous poem, so I wanted to make sure we did it a few times, all right? Now we've got rhyme scheme. We've got sleep, book, look, deep. So these two rhyme and these two rhyme. That's A, B, B, A. Grace would be C. True doesn't rhyme with grace, so that would be D. You rhymes with true, that's D. Face rhymes with grace, that's C. So in this particular poem, that rhyme scheme is repeated in each of the three stanzas that are there. Now, if we're counting up syllables, when you are old and gray and full of sleep, that's 10. This one is in iambic pentameter. Each of the lines has 10 syllables, and they definitely follow the I am pattern instead of the crochet pattern, because you, old, gray, full, and sleep are the accented syllables, not when, are, and of. All right? So we've got iambic pentameter and we've got a rhyme scheme. All right, guys, I'm going to end this here because I don't have enough time left to do the last poem. This is going to be part 1 of tone and mood and how they are impacted by imagery and diction. So thanks for listening, and be sure to look for part 2.